Hey, welcome back to Well, That's Interesting. The Dear God, this is a lot, even for this show, edition. Today is episode 222, How to Fit a Dozen Larvae in One Man's Eye, and corneal melt is as awful as it sounds. My friends, let's start with the good news, and by good, I mean great. We have reached the incredibly curvy, drop-dead gorgeous number of 222, and although there's no overpriced congratulatory Hallmark card to give you, I think I found a way to celebrate. But before I drop that festive load on you, I do want to take a moment and thank every one of you for rating the show on your podcast app of choice, for subscribing, leaving a comment, for tuning in week after week, for telling your friends all the bizarre things I've shoveled into your ears over the months and years, and for telling them about this one little podcast out there in the world. Thanks to you, we have reached this milestone. All these things add up and help grow the show. And I'm not kidding when I say that. At the time of me recording this episode, we are over 2,300 subscribers on Spotify alone. I think last time this year we were like half that number. You are amazing. Full stop. And so, my gift to you. Well, here's the bad... Well, I'd say it's not bad news. It's more like gross news. Everyone survives. They only have to deal with the emotional trauma, but they live. My gift to you are two stories that just may be the most uncomfortable, squirmiest stories yet. Being that this is 222, I figure let's talk about something we have two of. And that, my friends, is eyes. We're going to talk about what can happen to them, what can end up in them, and what can come out of them. That's what we're going to cover today. In the first half of the show, we are heading to the French countryside just beyond Pelé Natural Regional Park, known for its picture-perfect postcard mountains, trails, streams, and the occasional ancient chateau within its thousands of acres. But we won't be frolicking. Oh no. We will be visiting the nearby University Hospital of Saint-Étienne, where an older gentleman walked through the doors of the emergency room there after he developed an itching sensation in his right eye. Now, this happens to all of us, but in this case it lasted for several hours, becoming intolerable. Well, as you could tell by the title of today's episode, that eye became a goddamn apartment complex, and we will meet the residents. We will learn about a species of fly we haven't covered yet on this show, and we've covered a lot. We will talk about its life cycle, and of course, how in the holy hell so many ended up in this man's head. Oh, by the way, this is a heavy photo day because, yes, I have photos to pair with this information like a delicious wine. In fact, I have photos that will, well, let's just say you will be unable to unsee for both stories, and it's available on our social media stuff, so have that up and ready to peep with your own, hopefully larva-free eyes. After the break, we're hopping into our time machine and dialing it way the fuck back to 2014. Now, a lot happened in 2014. For example, the Ebola outbreak in West Africa reached its main surge, killing more than 6,000 people. Gay marriage became legal in 18 more U.S. states before becoming law nationally and hopefully staying law in 2015. And Dennis Rodman and North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un became unlikely friends. That is so fucking weird, so you'll be forgiven for missing some wild news that came out of the New England Journal of Medicine at the same time. An article simply titled, Bilateral Corneal Perforation. Now look, listen, all I'm going to say is if you've ever wondered what human eyes would look like if you mixed in some goat, not the greatest of all time stuff, but the animal goat, I've got you covered. My friends, I hate to break this to you, but your cornea, the clear domed shape outer layer of the eye, can slip away. And what happens next? Well, let's just say something else can spill out. We will find out how this can happen, why in holy fuck it can happen, and who it can happen to. What a day. Hi, I'm Jill Chacha, and if this is your first time listening, what an episode to start on, and welcome to the flock, my pristine business goose. To begin, I'm going to ask you to grab your passport and baguette and to hold the fuck on, because we're warming up the old time machine, heading back just a smidge to 2022. Despite all the empty wine bottles in the back, we've landed gracefully in the equally graceful city of Saint-Étienne. And for my fellow geographically challenged Americans who are thinking, that sounds Frenchish to me, but I'm not really sure where we are, don't worry, I've got you. Everyone please imagine France. Thank you. Point to the very north. Perfect. There is the capital, Paris. Now, if you move your finger down past the middle of the country and move your finger to the right, voila, there is Lyon. Finally, one more time, moving south just a bit and to the left. Well, here we are in Saint-Étienne, a quiet city in the countryside of France. Now, although this is the countryside, being France, this city cannot help but douse itself in museums, an opera house, and modern architecture. This is all a wonderful contrast to just how ancient this area is and how close nature can be found within reach. In the 13th goddamn century, it was a mere small village built around a church dedicated to Saint Stephen, who in proper saintiness was stoned to death by an enraged mob after he supposedly ranted at them for not being down enough with the Holy Spirit and instead giving into idols or some such. I didn't look into it because I don't care, but what I do care about, and what I think you'd love, is his portrait by Renaissance painter Carlo Crivelli. Saint Stevie is absolutely fucking eating here. Take a look over at our social media stuffs, tap on today's post, and you shall see his mic drop statement. As part of his outfit, he's donning the rocks that killed him, like an accessory. He is giving martyr, and very much pouting about it. Anyway, back to Saint-Étienne, which is not only surrounded by green, lush mountains outside its city limits, but half the city itself, extends into Pelée Natural Regional Park. 160,000 acres of pristine land, including, I kid you not, an island called Butter Island, because France, and 47 communes, where some of which you could book a stay and visit their wineries and cheesemongers. Again, because this is France. What I mean to say is that Saint-Étienne drips with farmland, wild nature, and modern life, a combination that can at times lead to some interesting situations. Please join me, will you, at the University Hospital of Saint-Étienne, where a 53-year-old man walked through the doors of the emergency room with a seemingly banal complaint. His right eye was itchy. The only remarkable thing about the itchiness was that it wouldn't stop. He told the medical staff it went on for hours before finally giving up and arriving here, looking for relief. No pun intended. Luckily for our patient, Dr. Nicholas Abi Haidar and Dr. Thibaut Garcin were on hand and willing to give the eye a good old poke in the ophthalmology department. His examination started with reading the pyramid of letters off the eye chart we're all so familiar with, and he passed with flying colors. Our patient, although 53, had 20/20 vision in each eye. In fact, the good news just kept on coming. According to the medical report, published in the April 2022 edition of the New England Journal of Medicine, quote, examination of his right eye showed conjunctival hyperemia without purulence and a normal anterior chamber and fundus, end quote. Well, my friends, that is a fancy-ass way of saying his right eye wasn't oozing any pus or excretions, and that the inside, the fundus, or the very back surface of the eye, including the retina, macula, the optic disc, and all those blood vessels, they were in tip-top shape. Upon this inspection, the only sign of irritation was conjunctival hyperemia, aka the conjunctiva, the thin, clear membrane that lines the inside of the eyelids and covers the whole white part of our eyes, was red. What few signs existed, pointing to the source of our patient's problem, were pointing to the conjunctiva. Now it was time for a second, much closer look. So you know what that means, my magnified business goose? Please drop whatever it is you are holding, be it your kitten, your child, your scalding hot coffee. It'll be fine. Pick up your phone. Head on over to our Instagram, Blue Sky Threads, or whatever the fuck, and tap on today's post. Swipe past our self-pitying St. Stevie, and I present to you an unmarked photo of a small section of our patient's right eye. I have it up here myself, and the top of the photo includes the man's blue iris, which is lovely, but the bottom of the picture, or the white part of his eye, girl, it looks like it's been clawed at. I'm not gonna lie, it's red, it's irritated, there are veins crisscrossing everywhere. Now, I left this photo unmarked for a reason. I ask, do you see it? If you don't be shy. Expand the photo, get in there, make it bigger, do the little pinchy thing and expand. Do you see anything out of place? Or rather, something that shouldn't be there? Okay, for those who are like, Jill, what the fuck? I need a little help here, even though I don't want it. I get that. But I also got you. Swipe past this photo, and I'll have screenshots of a video that the journal provided of the things, plural, swimming around in the whites of his eye. I'll give you a sec. Yeah, if you thought screenshots of them were too much, just be thankful I didn't post the video of them sloshing about and taking a road trip all around Eyeball Town. My friends, my uncomfortable business goose. According to the report, the medical staff found, quote, more than a dozen mobile translucent larvae on the cornea, the bulbar conjunctiva, and upper and lower conjunctival fornices. End quote. I don't think I need to translate this, but just in case, it means, girl, you got larva babies all over your goddamn eyeball. Like a lot. And I bet you have some questions like, how and what the fuck? And 12? All valid. Let's start with a little investigation into the man's very French day. It turns out, like many innocent instances on this show, he found himself out and about, enjoying the sun and gardening. Now, if you're a longtime listener of this show, then you know that gardening is an extreme sport. Back in episode 166, we talk about the gardener who was the only human to survive a black leg infection, which is a parasitic-borne disease that usually targets cattle, and it targets them with such ferocity they die within a week. Just a month ago, in episode 217, we need to talk about these grave-robbing badgers and these fish that can count. We learned about 88-year-old Ann Mathers, who called her daughter, quote, in hysterics after discovering a human skull. You guessed it, in her garden. Here, today, this gardener found himself downwind of a nearby horse and sheep farm. And the only incident that stood out before this larva clusterfuckery was the sensation of something like sand getting in his eye. After giving it a rub, it was gone. But shortly thereafter, the itchiness began. With this information, Dr. Nick and Dr. Thibault had an idea of who these little fuckers may be, but to be sure, they had to get them out, one by one, and put them under a microscope. And so it began. With a few splashes of a local anesthetic eye drop, the team used extremely fine forceps to slowly hunt down and pluck out any and all observable moving larvae. I am happy to report in one session they caught all 12, and our patient's face was diagnosed with, drumroll please, ophthalmomyiasis, or an infection of the outer structures of the eye by fly larvae, but he was now bug-free. Yay. And I have even better news. If you'd like to see the culprits, yes, of course, I can help. Swipe past those screenshots from before, because I've got a full body shot to show you. My friends, may I introduce you to Ostris ovis, or as it's more commonly known as the sheep botfly in larva form. Now, it looks really unassuming, doesn't it? It almost looks like a weird grain of rice. But I ask, take a moment. Take a peek along the outline of its body. Take a look at the head too. It's there to the end, at the left. Now, if you said to yourself, holy shit, thanks Jill, I would have missed that and slept better tonight if I did, you're right. What looks like hundreds of tiny hairs are actually body spikes. And that head, protruding like two triangles, are mouth hooks. If you feel so inclined, and I really recommend it as to get a sense of how fucking awful this truly is, all you need to do is, you got it, swipe past this image, and you'll see a magnified image of all of this. I'll give you a sec. Awful. Now remember, there were 12 of them, and that explains the itching and the irritation, but it doesn't explain how they got in this dude's eye. Or why the fuck they're decked out in spikes like the way St. Stevie was decked out in rocks. Well, turns out, it's all in the name, my illustrious business goose. Let's talk about the sheep botfly. Not to be confused with the lunsfly, which we all learned about in our Halloween episode 212. Let's talk about maggots hatching from people's foreheads and the deepest cave in Australia, so far. Good times were had by all. Have a listen if you haven't. Now, full grown, the sheep botfly is a wee 10 to 12 millimeters or 3/8 to half an inch long, and by all outward appearances, it looks just like what a fly would look like if I said, imagine a fly. But its reproductive cycle is what really makes it stand out from all the rest. Unlike other flies that lay fertilized eggs, females are known to larviposit, which is a fancy-ass way of saying those eggs hatch while still inside the female fly. She's totally preggo. She then deposits these larvae in a droplet of sorts on the nostrils of farm animals like horses, goats, and of course, sheep. Now, why nostrils? You may be wondering, well, like with humans, location is everything. And this real estate happens to be open. It isn't being used by other parasites. There's plenty of room. The goal here is for the larva to use them spikes and fangs to crawl its sausagey body up and into the nasal sinus, where it would snuggle in to feed, grow, and molt into a bigger sausage. When the larva is fully developed, it moves down the nasal passage and drops to the ground, where it buries itself and pupates. In 3 to 9 weeks, bing bang boom, an adult digs itself out, and the miracle of life cycles again. So, as you can see, no pun intended, the mama sheep botfly in our story took a wrong turn and landed on a human face. Her last act was being squished into an eye where her babies were squeezed out safely. Unfortunately, though, it was a dead end. All they could do inside a human eye was wander confused and aimlessly in circles. Speaking of confused, if you're wondering, and I know you are, just how often a human plays accidental host to a sheep botfly, drumroll please. Thank you in the back. I've got 2 answers. Choose the one you like best. One study, published in the journal BMC Ophthalmology, found that ostrich ovis infecting humans is a rare event, with only 295 cases reported worldwide between 1918 and 2017. So, about 300 cases in 100 years. But, and a big but here. As reported by ScienceAlert.com, the annual incidence of eye infestation could be as high as 10 out of every 100,000 people. This discrepancy may be possible because this is generally not a life-threatening parasite, and its presence often goes undetected. Don't ask me how that is possible, and especially don't ask this patient, who was treated with topical antibiotics, released from the emergency room, and upon a 10-day follow-up, good news. For real, take a breath. His face was still larva and botfly free. It ended well. Eventually. After the break. This was just a warm-up, my ocular business goose. We are leaving botflies for a good old-fashioned disease. We are heading on over to Medical Oddities Lane for what will be a first on this show, and thankfully, a last. Melting eyeballs. next. Stay tuned.
This episode is brought to you by MeUndies. While MeUndies can't totally help your love life this Valentine's Day, they can offer you insanely comfy undies and loungewear to buy or gift. MeUndies has so many awesome Valentine's Day prints and styles. Plus, you can match with your partner, friends, or even your pets. This Valentine's Day, give the gift that'll keep them thinking of you and score huge site-wide savings at MeUndies.com/Spotify. That's MeUndies.com/Spotify. MeUndies. Comfort from the outside in.
In the time it takes us to say, we're using Folgers Instant Coffee, seamlessly blended with water and ice. A splash of whatever kind of milk is your thing. And gotta get that caramel drizzle. All to make a toasty, roasty, caramel iced coffee. You could be enjoying it. Every damn sip of it. Damn right. It's Folgers Instant.
And we're back. We are so back. And my friends, you know that TikTok and Instagram fad called Is It Real or Cake? Where people spend hours baking and icing all to transform ingredients into a hyper-realistic looking object, like a fucking blender or a laptop. And then they whip out a knife, and us poor saps are locked into watching if it really is what it is, or a goddamn cake. You know the one, and it won't fucking stop. Anyway, what I mean to say is head to that goddamn platform where you watch those videos and tap on today's post on our social media accounts. What you're going to see is a cross-section of a human eye that is not cake. It is also not a real cross-section of a human eye either, because I would be in so much trouble. As to why I'm showing you this graphic is to experience what an average eye looks like when intact, and to learn what parts go where. And we're doing this because the story we're about to dive into includes some of these parts, and they won't be in place. Let's begin. Let's start with our good old friend, the cornea, which is the first and outermost layer. Hello. To its left and right is the scleria, a strong protective layer that gives the eye its white color and is made of dense connective tissue, mainly collagen fibers that are randomly arranged. This is not to be confused with our other familiar friend, the conjunctiva, which is here too. Hello. Remember that it's the thin, clear membrane that covers the inside of the eyelid, and it just so happens to cover the the other one I just said, the scleria. Sclera? Anyway, the conjunctiva produces mucus and tears to lubricate and protect the eye. Just behind all of this is the fancy pants aqueous humor or chamber, which is basically a layer of moisture because you can't be too moisturized. Behind this is our colorful friend, the iris, which regulates the amount of light that enters the eye, and it enters the eye through the pupil, which is located behind it at the center. These are the players in today's story, which also just so happens to take place at the Singapore National Eye Center in Malaysia, back in a year we can only dream of, 2014. It was here a 61-year-old woman checked herself in, singing a tune we've heard before. It feels as though something is in my right eye. When the medical staff, including Dr. Jean S.M. Chai, leaned in to take a look, they couldn't believe what they saw. And guess what? That's about to happen to you. Please look away from whatever it is you're concentrating on, be it the road or a loved one, they don't matter. Swipe past the graphic of the human eye to take a peek at some real ones. And yes, I assure you, they're real. I'll give you a second. Now, if your reaction was something in the ballpark of, Jesus Christ, what is going on here? You are not alone. Yes, what it looks like here is an enlarged iris and a warped or teardrop-shaped pupil. And like I said at the top of the show in the intro, I said it kind of looks like if you mixed a human eye and a goat eye together. It is funky and scary as hell, and we're about to learn why this is happening to this lady, not only in her right eye, but both. The first thing the medical team did was check on the woman's visual health, and by golly, it wasn't great. Before this incident, she had a long-standing problem with cataracts, and when combined with seemingly melting eyeballs, her vision registered as 2400 in the right eye and 2200 in the left eye. Remember, 20/20 vision means that a person can see things clearly at a distance of 20 feet. Our patient saw at 20 feet what a normal eye sees at 400 feet and 200 feet. This would explain why, when she looked in the mirror, she couldn't see what was happening to her face. All she could experience was the feeling that something was floating around in her right eye. And what was floating around, my friends, was her goddamn cornea. When delving deeper into her medical history, it turns out this poor woman also suffered from rheumatoid arthritis, which is a fucking awful chronic autoimmune disease. For most of us, we know it as a condition that causes inflammation, pain, swelling, stiffness, tenderness in joints, like your fingers, knees, and wrists, and whatnot. But good news. Because it's an autoimmune disease, it can attack basically any part of the body. According to the medical report published in the February 2014 edition of the New England Journal of Medicine, the patient's own immune system attacked the areas of the eye adjacent to the cornea, resulting in tearing of that tissue. Now disconnected, it allowed the iris, which sits just behind the cornea, to slip out. The result is the image before you. An irregularly exposed pupil, no longer circular, but whatever the fuck that is. And even better news. This has happened before, and to enough people where it has its own medical term, corneal perforation, or as it's more commonly known as corneal melt. And I bet you have a few questions like, why did you tell me this? And what in the holy hell do you have to do to fix it? Wait, you can fix it, right? All great questions. First, I told you this because once I found out, I couldn't carry it alone. And two, it can't be completely fixed, as in cured, because there is no cure for rheumatoid arthritis, but it can be mended. Dr. Mark Frommer, rolls off the tongue, director of the Frommer Eye Centers in New York and an ophthalmologist at Lenox Hill Hospital. Dr. Mark told LiveScience.com, although it is very rare for corneal melt to affect both eyes, surgery can be performed to save them. So what the fuck does that entail? Stitches, basically. An eye surgeon may take a small piece of cornea and suture it to the area. They may also decide to remove the conjunctiva to stop the body from attacking it. In this case, surgeons sutured a graft on her eyes and gave her medication to suppress the immune system. And yes, I have photos of that graft. If you look close, you'll see some amazing stitch work. I never thought you could stitch an eyeball, but here we are. I'm so damn relieved to let you know that her vision did improve to 2150 in the right eye and 2100 in the left eye. Her cornea is no longer floating around, and that is great news. And it's highly suggested that folks with rheumatoid arthritis or any autoimmune disease should have their eyes checked regularly, quote, preferably twice a year. With a regular checkup, the condition can be detected earlier. Once the eye perforates, then it's a real emergency, end quote. End quote. Dr. Mark added in the interview, great advice, Mark. And thank you for listening, rating, subscribing, getting through this. High five. Well done. Tell your friends. Show your friends with their eyes what corneal melt is. I hope you enjoyed this celebration of hitting 222 episodes and over 2,300 subscribers on Spotify. Oh man, I cannot wait for episode 300. An uncomfortable thanks to the folks over at Airwave Media, the podcast network to which WTI belongs. If you love this show, and you do, you'll love the other podcasts in this family. And please, stay interesting.